In a quiet suburb of Seattle, Washington, the life of the Thornton family seemed to be the epitome of the American dream. Rachel Thornton, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher, and her husband Michael, a 36-year-old successful architect, had been married for 10 years. Their union was considered one of the strongest in the Maplewood neighborhood, where they lived in a cozy 2-story house. The family's best friend was Jason Hawthorne, a 35-year-old bachelor who worked as a financial analyst. He had met Rachel in college, and they had remained close friends ever since. When Rachel started dating Michael, Jason easily integrated into their company, becoming a frequent guest at the Thorntons' home. No one could have predicted that this idyllic picture would soon crumble, setting in motion a chain of events that would shake not only Maplewood, but the entire city of Seattle. The story, which began as a banal love triangle, soon evolved into something much darker and more dangerous. It all started in April 2022, when Michael Thornton unexpectedly began staying late at work. Rachel, who initially didn't pay much attention to this, gradually began to notice changes in her husband's behavior. He became more irritable, frequently checked his phone, and avoided conversations about his late returns home. At the same time, Jason Hawthorne started spending more time with Rachel, comforting her and providing moral support. None of them suspected that this situation would lead to tragic consequences that would forever change their lives. The Seattle police first encountered this case on July 15, 2022, when an emergency call came in from the Thorntons' home. What began as a routine investigation of a domestic dispute soon turned into one of the most high-profile cases in the city's history. This story is not just a chronicle of a crime. It's a deep exploration of human relationships, betrayal, and the consequences of ill-considered decisions. It shows how thin the line is between love and hate, loyalty and infidelity, and how one wrong decision can lead to irreversible consequences. In the course of our narrative, we will examine each stage of this tragedy in detail, relying on police reports, witness testimonies, and court documents. We will try to understand the motives of each participant in this drama and trace the chain of events that led to an unexpected and shocking denouement. This story serves as a reminder that even in the most prosperous families, dark secrets can lurk, and human passions can push a person to the most desperate acts. Rachel Thornton was born and raised in Seattle. From childhood, she showed an interest in education, and after graduating from the University of Washington, she began working as a teacher at Maplewood Elementary School. Colleagues spoke of her as a conscientious and creative educator. Rachel was of average height, with chestnut hair and kind brown eyes. Her open smile and gentle nature endeared her to both children and adults. Michael Thornton moved to Seattle from Portland after obtaining his master's degree in architecture. Tall, fit, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, he quickly made a career in a prestigious architectural firm. Michael was known for his hard work and innovative approach to design. He was ambitious and goal-oriented, which sometimes led to workaholism. Jason Hawthorne, a native of Tacoma, moved to Seattle to study at the university, where he met Rachel. Of average build, with sandy hair and green eyes, he had an appealing appearance and a sharp mind. After graduating from the economics department, Jason got a job at a large financial company, where he quickly climbed the career ladder. Rachel and Michael met at a charity event in 2010. Their relationship developed rapidly, and a year later they were married. The wedding was modest but elegant, and Jason was Michael's best man. After the wedding, the newlyweds bought a house in Maplewood, a quiet and cozy area of Seattle. The first years of the Thorntons' marriage were filled with happiness and mutual understanding. Rachel supported her husband's career ambitions, and Michael valued her dedication to work and kindness. They often hosted parties for friends, and Jason was their constant guest. Jason, despite his career success, was in no hurry to start a family. He maintained a close friendship with Rachel, often turning to her for advice on personal matters. Michael, in turn, valued Jason's friendship and often invited him to men's gatherings. By 2022, the situation began to change. Michael was increasingly staying late at work, explaining it as an important project. Rachel, feeling her husband's emotional distance, began spending more time with Jason. Their long-standing friendship served as her comfort and support. Neighbors and colleagues of the Thorntons noticed these changes, but attributed them to the usual difficulties of family life. No one could have imagined that behind the facade of a prosperous family, a serious crisis was brewing. In early April 2022, Michael unexpectedly canceled a planned vacation with Rachel, citing an urgent project. This became a turning point in their relationship. Rachel, disappointed and upset, turned to Jason for comfort, not suspecting that this decision would lead to unforeseen consequences. In mid-April 2022, Michael Thornton began work on a major project to reconstruct a historic district in downtown Seattle. This commission could be a breakthrough in his career, and he immersed himself completely in the work. Long meetings, nights spent poring over blueprints, and constant meetings with contractors became the norm in his life. Rachel, faced with her husband's emotional absence, began to experience feelings of loneliness and insecurity. She tried to talk to Michael about her concerns, but he, absorbed in his work, merely brushed her off, promising that everything would be fine after the project was completed. During this period, Jason Hawthorne became Rachel's main source of support. He often stopped by after work. They cooked dinner together, watched movies, or just talked. Jason listened attentively to Rachel's complaints about her husband's detachment and did his best to cheer her up. In early May, Michael left for a 2-week business trip to New York to coordinate project details with investors. Rachel, feeling completely alone, invited Jason to stay overnight after another joint dinner. This decision became fateful. That night, under the influence of alcohol and pent-up emotions, Rachel and Jason became intimately involved. The next morning, both felt a strong sense of guilt and agreed to forget about what had happened, attributing it all to a momentary weakness. However, forgetting proved not so simple. After Michael's return from the business trip, Rachel began to experience severe pangs of conscience. She tried to behave as usual, but her behavior became more nervous and tense. Michael, immersed in his work, did not notice these changes. Jason, for his part, tried to keep his distance, but his feelings for Rachel, which he had long suppressed, now came to the surface. He began to look for reasons to meet, sent her messages, and called under various pretexts. By the end of May, Rachel realized that she could not resist her feelings for Jason. Their secret meetings became regular. They met in cafes in other parts of the city, walked in parks where no one knew them. Each such meeting intensified Rachel's feelings of guilt, but she couldn't stop. Michael, completely immersed in his project, did not notice the changes in his wife's behavior. He became even more detached, often missing family dinners and spending weekends at the office. His absence only strengthened the emotional connection between Rachel and Jason. In early June, Rachel began to seriously think about the future of her marriage. She loved Michael, but felt that they had grown apart. Jason seemed more attentive and understanding to her. She found herself at a crossroads, not knowing what to do. Jason, in turn, began to dream of a future together with Rachel. He understood that he was betraying his friendship with Michael, but could not resist his feelings. He began to cautiously talk to Rachel about the possibility of divorce and starting a new life together. The situation was heating up. Rachel felt that she was losing control of the situation. She understood that sooner or later the truth would come out, and the consequences would be catastrophic for all participants in this love triangle. By the end of June, Rachel had decided to confess everything to Michael and try to save their marriage. She had no idea that events would take a completely unexpected turn that would forever change the lives of all three main characters in this drama. July 1, 2022, became a turning point in the lives of the Thorntons and Jason Hawthorne. Michael unexpectedly returned home earlier than usual. Intending to surprise Rachel, he had finally completed the main part of the project and wanted to celebrate with his wife. However, upon entering the house, he heard muffled voices coming from the bedroom. Michael quietly climbed the stairs, his heart pounding with a bad premonition. Opening the bedroom door, he caught Rachel and Jason in an unambiguous situation. Shock and fury overwhelmed Michael. He couldn't believe his eyes. His wife and best friend had betrayed his trust. The scene that unfolded in the Thorntons' house was full of drama. Rachel, overcome with panic and shame, tried to explain something, but the words stuck in her throat. Jason, pale and confused, stood silently by the window, not knowing what to say or do. Michael, usually restrained and rational, this time could not control his emotions. He lunged at Jason with his fists, shouting about betrayal and deception. A fight broke out, during which a table lamp was broken and a wardrobe overturned. Rachel, trying to separate the men, received a blow and fell, hitting her head on the edge of the bed. The noise attracted the attention of neighbors, and someone called the police. Within a few minutes, a patrol car arrived at the scene. Officers Johnson and Martinez, entering the house, discovered a chaotic scene. Michael, breathing heavily, sat on the floor. Leaning against the wall, Jason, with a split lip, stood in the corner of the room. Rachel, crying, was applying a cold towel to her head. The officers quickly assessed the situation and called an ambulance for Rachel, who had developed a small hematoma on her head. They also separated the men and began questioning the participants in the conflict. Michael, still in a state of shock, told the officers about how he caught his wife with a friend. His story was disjointed and emotional. Jason, on the contrary, remained silent, answering the police questions monosyllabically. Rachel, through tears, tried to explain the situation, but her account was intermittent and illogical. Neighbors, drawn by the noise and the appearance of the police, gathered near the Thorntons' house. Rumors began to spread through the quiet suburb at the speed of a forest fire. The story of the perfect family, destroyed by infidelity, became the main topic of discussion in Maplewood. Officer Johnson, an experienced policeman, understood that the situation could escalate at any moment. He suggested that Jason leave the house and not approach the Thornton family in the near future. Michael was advised to spend the night with friends or relatives to give all participants in the conflict time to cool down and come to their senses. Rachel, after being examined by paramedics, refused hospitalization. She remained alone in the house, surrounded by shattered dreams and broken hopes. Before leaving, the police left her contact information for a crisis center and advised her to seek professional help. This night became the beginning of a new chapter in the lives of all three participants in the drama. Michael, staying with his brother, couldn't sleep, reliving what had happened over and over again. Jason, returning to his apartment, sat in the dark, realizing that he had lost not only the woman he loved, but also his best friend. Rachel, left alone in the empty house, cried, not knowing how to live on and whether it was possible to fix what she had destroyed. None of them suspected that this was only the beginning of the drama that would unfold in the coming days and weeks, and that the worst was yet to come. Over the next week, tensions between the participants in the love triangle continued to escalate. Michael Thornton, unable to cope with the betrayal, sank into a deep depression. He took time off work, citing family circumstances, and spent most of his time in his brother's apartment, refusing contact with the outside world. Rachel, left alone in the family home, tried to contact her husband, sending him messages and leaving voice messages with pleas for forgiveness and a chance to explain everything. However, Michael ignored all her attempts to establish contact. Feelings of guilt and despair overwhelmed Rachel. She began to miss work, which did not go unnoticed by her colleagues and school administration. Jason Hawthorne, realizing the seriousness of the situation, tried to keep his distance. He called Rachel several times, expressing concern about her condition, but she asked him not to interfere, fearing to aggravate the situation even more. On July 8th, an incident occurred that further exacerbated the conflict. Michael, under the influence of alcohol, came to Jason's house late in the evening. He began shouting and banging on the door, demanding that Jason come out and answer for his actions like a man. Neighbors, frightened by the loud noise, called the police. The officers who arrived at the scene found Michael in a state of severe alcoholic intoxication. He resisted when they tried to calm him down and was detained for disturbing public order. Jason, not wanting to aggravate the situation, refused to press charges against his former friend. News of Michael's detention quickly reached Rachel. She immediately went to the police station to post bail for her husband. However, When she tried to talk to Michael, he refused to see her, which was another blow for Rachel. In the following days, the situation continued to heat up. Michael, after leaving the police station, began sending angry messages to Rachel and Jason, accusing them of ruining his life. He threatened to disclose information about their affair to all acquaintances and colleagues, which could seriously damage the reputation of both. Rachel, not knowing how to cope with the situation, sought help from a psychologist. In the sessions, she talked about her feelings for Jason, about how she had grown apart from her husband, and about her fear of losing everything that was dear to her. Jason, in turn, began receiving anonymous threats. Someone left notes on his apartment door with insults and warnings to stay away from other men's wives. Fearing for his safety, he installed a surveillance camera at the front door. By mid-July, rumors about the scandal in the Thornton family had spread throughout Maplewood. Rachel's colleagues at school began to treat her with obvious disapproval, and some parents of students even demanded her dismissal, believing that she was setting a bad example for the children. Michael, unable to cope with the emotional stress, began to show signs of unstable behavior. He alternated between begging Rachel to return and start over, and threatening her with divorce and lawsuits. His brother, concerned about Michael's condition, tried to convince him to seek professional help, but to no avail. The situation was becoming increasingly tense, and it seemed that it was about to reach a point of no return. None of the participants in this drama could foresee what a terrible turn events would take in the near future. July 20th, 2022 became the culmination point in this drama. The day began as usual. Rachel went to work at school, Jason to his office, and Michael continued to stay in his brother's apartment, refusing to communicate with anyone. Around noon, Michael unexpectedly appeared at the school where Rachel worked. He was in a state of strong emotional agitation. His speech was incoherent, and his eyes were red as if he hadn't slept for several days. The school security guard tried to stop him, but Michael pushed him aside and burst into the classroom where Rachel was conducting a lesson. Students panicked and ran out of the class when Michael started shouting at Rachel, blaming her for all his misfortunes. Rachel tried to calm her husband down, but her words seemed to only intensify his anger. The school principal, hearing the noise, called the police. When the officers arrived, Michael had already left the school building. Rachel, with trembling hands, gave a statement to the police and agreed to the suggestion to stay with a friend for a few days for her own safety. That evening, Jason received a disturbing message from Rachel, in which she told him about what had happened at the school and expressed fear for her life. Jason, concerned for her safety, suggested meeting in a park near Rachel's house to discuss the situation. They met around 9 p.m. in a deserted part of the park. Rachel was frightened and confused. She cried, telling Jason about her fears and doubts. Jason tried to comfort her, hugging her and assuring her that everything would be all right. Neither of them noticed Michael approaching. He had been following Rachel all day and, seeing her meeting with Jason, completely lost control of himself. In his hand was a kitchen knife he had taken from his brother's apartment. The next few minutes were full of chaos and horror. Michael lunged at Jason with the knife, inflicting random blows. Rachel screamed, trying to pull her husband away, but in the heat of the struggle, Michael accidentally wounded her as well. The noise attracted the attention of passers-by. Someone called the police and an ambulance. When emergency services arrived at the scene, they discovered a horrifying picture. Jason was lying on the ground with multiple stab wounds. Rachel, wounded in the arm, was trying to stop the bleeding, and Michael was sitting nearby, still clutching the bloodied knife and muttering something incoherent. Jason and Rachel were immediately taken to the hospital. Jason's condition was critical. He had lost a lot of blood, and doctors were fighting for his life. Rachel, who had received less serious injuries, was in a state of shock. Michael was arrested at the scene of the crime. He did not resist during the arrest and seemed not fully aware of what had happened. He was taken to the police station, where he was to await charges. News of the bloody drama in the quiet suburb of Seattle instantly spread throughout the city. Journalists besieged the hospital and police station, trying to get details of the incident. The residents of Maplewood were shocked. No one could believe that such a thing could happen in their peaceful neighborhood. This evening became a turning point in the lives of all participants in the drama. Now they had to face not only the emotional consequences of their actions, but also the harsh reality of criminal justice. Over the next few days following the incident in the park, the Seattle police launched a large-scale investigation. Detectives Sarah Moriarty and James Coleman were appointed as lead investigators on the case. On July 21st, the day after the attack, the detectives began their work by interrogating Michael Thornton. He was in the detention center, still in a state of emotional shock. Michael's lawyer, Robert Stevenson, was present during the interrogation. Michael seemed to have difficulty grasping the reality of what was happening. His testimony was confused and contradictory. At times he admitted his guilt, saying he couldn't bear their betrayal, and at other times he claimed he didn't remember anything about the events in the park. Detective Moriarty noted in her report clear signs of the suspect's unstable mental state. In parallel with Michael's interrogation, Detective Coleman was collecting evidence at the crime scene. The bloody knife found next to Michael was sent for forensic analysis. DNA samples and fingerprints were also collected. On July 22nd, the detectives visited the hospital to question Rachel Thornton. She was still in a state of severe stress, but was able to give consistent testimony about the events leading up to the attack. Rachel told about the growing tension in her relationship with Michael, about her affair with Jason, and about her husband's frightening behavior in recent weeks. Jason Hawthorne was still in critical condition and unable to give testimony. Doctors were fighting for his life, and the prognosis was not encouraging. On July 23rd, the detectives conducted a search of the Thorntons' house and Michael's brother's apartment, where he had been living recently. In the house, they found broken photographs of Rachel and Michael, as well as several empty bottles of hard liquor. In his brother's apartment, they found Michael's diary, in which he described his agonizing experiences and plans for revenge. On July 24th, the results of the forensic examination confirmed that the blood on the knife belonged to both Jason and Rachel. The fingerprints on the handle matched Michael's. On July 25th, Detectives Moriarty and Coleman presented the collected evidence to King County Prosecutor Peter Davidson. After studying the case materials, the prosecutor decided to charge Michael Thornton with attempted first-degree murder and infliction of grievous bodily harm. On July 26th, the first court hearing took place, where Michael was officially charged. Judge Elaine Carter, considering the severity of the crime and the unstable mental state of the accused, ordered that he be held in custody without the right to bail until the start of the trial. Michael's lawyer stated his intention to build a defense based on his client's insanity at the time of the crime. He demanded a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, Jason Hawthorne's condition remained critical. Doctors had performed several complex surgeries, but his life was still in danger. Rachel Thornton, discharged from the hospital, was under police protection. She was the main witness for the prosecution and feared for her safety. By the end of July, this case had become the main news topic not only in Seattle, but throughout the state of Washington. Journalists tried to get comments from all participants in the drama, besieging the hospital, police station, and courthouse. The investigation continued, and Detectives Moriarty and Coleman were working on gathering additional evidence, preparing for the upcoming trial, which promised to be one of the most high-profile in Seattle's history. The trial of Michael Thornton began on September 15, 2022, and attracted enormous public and media attention. The King County courtroom was packed, and crowds of journalists and onlookers gathered outside the courthouse. Prosecutor Peter Davidson opened the proceedings with an emotional speech, describing Michael as a man blinded by jealousy and thirst for revenge. He detailed the events leading up to the attack in the park, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the defendant's actions. Defense attorney Robert Stevenson, in turn, focused on Michael's mental state. He argued that his client had acted in a state of temporary insanity caused by severe emotional stress and alcohol abuse. Over the next 2 weeks, the court heard testimony from numerous witnesses. Rachel Thornton, still visibly shaken by what had happened, gave emotional testimony about the development of her relationship with Michael and the events leading up to the attack. Her account of her fear for her life and Jason's made a strong impression on the jury. Jason Hawthorne, who by the start of the trial had emerged from critical condition but was still in the hospital, gave testimony via video link. His account of the attack and his struggle for life was met with sympathy from the public. A key moment in the trial was the testimony of psychiatrist Dr. Elizabeth Chang, who had conducted an evaluation of Michael. She concluded that although the defendant had suffered from severe emotional stress, he was not legally insane at the time of committing the crime. On September 28, Michael Thornton unexpectedly asked to speak. In his speech, he expressed deep remorse for his actions, admitted his guilt, and asked for forgiveness from Rachel and Jason. His emotional performance brought many in the courtroom to tears. After 3 days of deliberations on October 1st, the jury reached a verdict. Michael Thornton was found guilty of attempted first-degree murder and infliction of grievous bodily harm. However, the jury recommended leniency, taking into account his remorse and lack of criminal history. On October 5th, Judge Elaine Carter handed down the sentence. Michael Thornton was sentenced to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. The judge also ordered that he undergo mandatory psychological treatment while serving his sentence. After the sentencing, Rachel Thornton made a brief statement to the press, expressing hope that this tragedy would serve as a lesson to others and help draw attention to the issues of domestic violence and emotional health. Jason Hawthorne declined to comment, focusing on his recovery. His lawyer reported that they were considering filing a civil lawsuit against Michael Thornton to compensate for medical expenses and emotional damages. The Thornton case became the subject of numerous discussions in society, raising questions about the nature of jealousy, the consequences of marital infidelity, and the importance of mental health. Several local organizations used this case to promote programs for preventing domestic violence and supporting mental health. This trial left a deep mark on the lives of all its participants and the residents of Maplewood, serving as a grim reminder of how quickly lives can be destroyed due to ill-considered actions and uncontrolled emotions.